Usual way? Explain, so I know the answer to your question. What is the background to your question?
Well,
No. Again, whether, as I go back to the point about earlier about what schools you went to or what your background is, no one gives a crap what your age is, as long as you can write. At 18 or 16, as you currently are, you still have the problem of, the toolbox scenario. The more you've written, the more stuff you can learn from. So you're still acquiring a toolbox at this age. So you may find yourself bumping up against a few things. However, having said that, go for it. Don't let anything stop you. The first time I ever had a play produced, I was like 16, 17. I sent it off to a theater in my area, and they loved it and wanted to produce it, and they got my mom, and they said, is so-and-so there? And they got me on the phone, and I sound like grown-up on the phone. And I showed up, they thought my dad was going to be there. I said, no, I wrote this. They wouldn't fucking believe me. I had to recite parts of it, but they would buy that. So it doesn't matter when you start, the earlier you start, the better off you're going to be, because writing is a lot like digging for oil. You got to pump out the mud and the water and the yuck and the dinosaur bones and the crap to get to the oil. Frankly, you're starting at 16, and I'm serious about both the writing and the marketing of it. You have an advantage going in, because it means you'll be working at this, getting the bad stuff out of your system early on. You're going to suck for quite a while as a writer. You just will. But on the other hand, if you write a story a week, 52 weeks, I challenge you to not be a better writer at the end of that year than you were when you started. So the answer to your question is, you follow the same process as any adult follows. You write it. What area are you looking into?
Actually, all sorts. I'm not much of a television writer, so much as almost all 3 works I've finished so far. All 3 of them are short stories.
Oh, you're fucked. his eyes just suddenly went to shit. No, fiction is a good area to get into. Short fiction, you will starve to death, but short fiction will teach you how to write long fiction. And when you write a novel, it doesn't matter again how old you are. It's a question of how good the book is. The good thing is that writing short stories will teach you, how to handle plot and construction in a very short period of time. That you can apply when you write your novels to making a chapter interesting and structured and have it move forward. Writing a novel teaches you how to write dialogue, which you can then use in a screenplay. All writing is good writing. I would also commend to you, if you're going to write short stories, investigate writing articles as well. Look into writing for your school paper or local magazines. The more you can acquire the chance to see your name in print as you published, and have someone like an editor look at your stuff and start showing you where your strengths and your weaknesses are, because you're going to have both, and get input from people, the better off you're going to be. It's a great reinforcement. Finding a market for short stories right now is really tough. But the article area, either online or local publications or school publications, those are all still open. And writing an article and publishing teaches you structure, teaches you dialogue, and all these things you can apply to the larger areas. When I was your age, and going into college, I set myself up with a local college paper, and I had something in every single day. They called it was called the Daily Aztec, but then I got done with it, they called it the Daily Joe, because there was something in mine every frickin' day, whether they wanted it or not. And by turning out 5 articles a week, and also writing plays for the college, theater, TV shows for the college radio, TV station, I learned a lot. By the time I got out of college, I had written something like 300 published articles and a bunch of plays and everything else. Don't look at your high school or at your college or experience as the cafeteria, the classrooms, and the parking lot. Look at all the opportunities you have in front of you now to hone your skill. You're in a great position right now because you can fail and not get killed for it. Once you leave high school, once you leave college, and you're out there trying to make it as a writer, and you fail, it's hard because economically it can hurt you. Right now you don't have that problem. So I would say go for broke. write like crazy. Submit your short stories as any adult would. Submit your articles as any adult would. Write your brains out. And be open and willing to fail. Failure is an important part of the writing process, whether we like to acknowledge that or not. The military says that failure is an important part of the process because if you don't fail from time to time of what you're doing it wrong. Not pushing yourself. The point is to find the wall, bounce up against it, and then climb over it. You have to get in to sort of accept your inner failure and then embrace that and not be afraid of it. And at your age, I would say fail gloriously. Just go out there and fail your heart out because you will learn by doing so in an astonishing number of ways. Here's how I learned the thing about failure. Again, go back to the college thing. I was writing for the San Diego State University paper, and a woman showed up one day who wanted to work for the paper, and she was beautiful. I'm talking if Lee Harvey Oswald had seen her through the scope of that rifle, would have burned the little fucker's eye out. We're living in a better world today. That's what I'm talking about, all right? And I was just in awe. I was just watching from a distance. And after about a month or so, she began dating the college paper photographer. Now, if you know photographers, let alone university photographers, it's not that they're scuzzy, but you got to peel off layers of awful to get to the scuzzy parts. And I couldn't figure it out, And finally, she's going to transfer into the year to a different school, a better school, a real school. And finally, I just said to her, first time I ever even talked to her really, and said, why? And she said, no one else asked me. I guess they were all too intimidated, especially you. Oh. But I was afraid of failure, and thus didn't pursue what my heart was saying to go after. Embrace your failure, embrace your school, embrace your opportunities, write your heart out, send your stuff out, articles, short stories, novels, whatever it is, learn everything. Because until you've tried everything, whether you've tried writing plays yet or television or whatever it is, you don't know if you like it or not. You may think these are the areas you want to go into, but if you've tried something else, you don't know. If you get a sampler platter at the buffet, eat everything. And somewhere along the way, you go, I like the flavor of this a lot. And that's going to be what your heart will direct you to do. Other questions? Over there, under the cap.
On a work for hire basis, do you take some editorial change that somebody wants that you feel strongly will damage the work? How do you do it?
Say no. If the moment you allow compromise behind you, the moment you go against your principles, then more will do the same thing. The moment you say there is no line to cross, then you have no value as a writer. You have no value as anything. And it will kill you in the end. If you feel that strongly about it, something that you look at and go, well, it can go either way, it's not a big deal, let it go. But if you feel strongly about it, I don't care where you are in your career, say fucking no. And I don't care if it hurts you economically or not. Well, how I got from journalism to television, I used to work as a reporter for many years. I ended up at Time Incorporated. And I shoved it my ass over to People. And there's a 10th circle of hell. It's People magazine. And every Tuesday morning we would gather in the office of the West Coast bureau chief, a woman named Martha, to pitch the stories we wanted to cover. And I was still hustling as a writer. I was still trying to make my way. And the woman on my immediate right, this is, pardon this, 85, pitched a story about a new national rape hotline she wanted to do a story about. And Martha said, and I quote verbatim, well, rape's been very good to us, but you have a new angle on the rape thing. And I knew what she meant, sex, sensationalism, scandal, sales, but I also knew what she meant. And I think that all of us, if everyone in this room has a trap door under you with one pin holding it in place, anything can knock that pin free. And my door opened, I fell through. And she said, do you have, anything to pitch? And I said, no, not really. And the meeting was done. I went up, got to my desk, got my stuff, walked out, never went back. You cannot, whether it's editorial input or recommendations or notes or the job or whatever, you cannot approach this from a position of fear. The chief commodity a writer has to sell is his courage. And if he has none, he is worse than a coward. He is a heretic and a zealot and a fink, because writing is a holy chore. That's not me, that's Harlan Ellison speaking. And I believe that to my soul. So if you know, what I would suggest though is sit down with the guy who's giving you the note, say, look, I think this is wrong. You and me, we're going to stay here and talk about this until either I convince you or you convince me of the rightness of our view. The authority should not be the issue. And if he's a good, proper editor or publisher or story editor, he will take the time to explain to you why this is being done. If it's because I said so, then there's nowhere to go. Then you either walk away or you let them do what they're going to do. Ma'am, you had a question. This is terrible. I've never had writer's block. I know. People hate me a lot when I say that. I get it. Just don't even think it's 4 o'clock. People tend to get writer's block when they're trying to force their brain to do something it doesn't want to do. There's a part of you that always points true north. And you are in your writing trying to get a character to do something or make a structural change that true north compass disagrees with, it shuts down. And for me, to avoid any kind of writer's block, I figure I'm not telling the story. I'm just watching the characters do what they do and writing it down. It's like watching a movie. You can make it like watching a movie. If you turn your television on, it doesn't have to wait for you to figure out what you want to do before it shows you pictures and sound. You know, think of it as just watching the film. And let your characters do the work for you. You shouldn't be having to carry all that burden and the pressure of, my God, the screen is there, what should I write? Let them do it for you. The best example I can give is, imagine your best friend for a second. If you haven't got one, borrow the friend of the person next to you. And at night, the lights are off, they're crossing the living room in the dark, and they bang their shin on the coffee table. Then you know your friend. You know exactly what your friend's going to say when that happens. Writing is no different. You get to know the characters and situations so well, whatever you drop them into, you don't have to work at it. You watch what they do. They're your friends. They walk into a bar, you know what's going to happen. You write it down. So that's probably the key thing too, is get out of your own way. Let the characters tell the story. You know where they're going to go. You put them in the car. Structurally, they're going to go from A to B to C. You know that. But once they're in the car, let them do what they're going to do. As long as they keep driving where you want them to drive, get out of the way. So, and also try, this may also help for you. To sit down at the computer and you don't know what to write is the hardest thing in the world. You're staring at this blinking cursor saying, what now, what now, what now? Fuck off, fuck off, fuck off. For me, what works is I don't write until I know exactly what I'm going to say. I will chew on the story in my head for days and days and days and days and days until I've cracked through it, and so that the whole thing is there, and you write it in white heat. Get it down as fast as you can. Better to spend 3 days thinking about it and 1 day writing about it than 7 days agonizing about it. So don't force yourself to the computer until you're ready to go. Give yourself time to think. And sometimes it's a matter of not being at the computer. It's a matter of sitting outside and watching the day. Inspiration comes to the damnedest times, but you have to be flexible enough and open enough to let that happen. Samurai used to be required to have hobbies, calligraphy, gardening, whatever it was, because they found that the best gardeners, the best calligraphers, often made the best samurai, because they were willing to be distracted and let themselves process. So you probably just are not giving yourself enough time to process and trying to force it through, and don't do that. Great Scott. So, out-thrust hand, yes.
I have two questions. One's easy, one's not so easy. But
You have 2 questions, one's hard, one's easy. Fuck the hard one.
I have needed time writing characters, but not in terms of scope in the universe of living. like in terms of the environment. I'm trying
What
to,
does that mean exactly?
I'm trying to make like the environment is not like, regular, it's just like an environment where all the characters, I mean, no matter what have powers, it's not like very like Superman is just hides like his hot head, like people like it and he's working and it just keeps the fact that he's like Superman, not gonna have like those superpowers. Everyone.
I see where you're having a problem being precise in your writing.
I mean, just in terms of the world where they live, in terms of like, I guess, the world, like a structure. I'll give the first like kind of like how The Hobbit has like the different different groups. And they're trying to form like different groups and how they interact with each other. How would you recommend?
And this is the problem that you're having in the reverse. You didn't think it through in it. So the last part of your sentence was the sentence I needed to hear. I think you don't give yourself enough time to prepare properly, given the question structure you just asked me. And if you're wanting to create worlds, do several things. One, if your character is a certain way, what kind of environment would create that character? I thought about in Babylon 5, Jakar being this warrior character, being a sort of a lizard-looking character. What would produce that? Well, obviously they've been through a lot of wars. That tells you one thing. If he is a kind of lizard-like, they probably don't have a lot of water where they come from. So you back up, take your characters, and figure out who they are, and then back into your environment from there. Second thing is turn to history. The human history will give you things that will sound completely alien if you do it properly. There was a part, again, in B5 where I had a person reference a story about Centauri tradition at the main palace where a guard would stand over the first flower of spring coming through the snow, and probably I did it wrong, where the guard would stand outside all the time in one particular spot and look at him why he was there. And they found out that 100 years before, first flower of spring came through and the princess said, guard the flower against the snow. When he stood there, no one ever countermanded the order, so that 100 years later, there was someone always standing at that spot. Well, that's a Russian story. That's the Tsarina did that, 100 years ago. So, looking to history will help you to create those characters. If you want a militaristic character, then look at the Soviet Union, look at the history of Nazi Germany, look at Imperial Rome. And steal your brains out. Good artists steal, bad artists borrow. Because you borrow it, you sort of take it to yourself. You don't really make it your own. You sort of spew it back out again, you give it back. Whereas if you steal, it becomes your own. You transmute it and make it your own. So take a history that is applicable to your character and redesign it to yourself, to your character, make it your own. Those are the two main things. Who's the character, how was that background that produced him, and then looking at what history might work well with that, sculpted around that background. What's the other question?
It's like in terms of feedback.
Well, you have exactly 15 seconds to ask the question.
When do you think it's a good time to ask people for feedback without like having to worry about like someone stealing your work or like just stealing your idea?
Okay. The time you ask for feedback is when you're done with it, not in the middle. Don't give anyone partial manuscripts because you'll get the feedback and the response of that, and you'll have the satisfaction of having written something without having finished it. So wait until you're done. And as far as stealing stuff, it really doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. Once in a very great while, someone will steal your stuff, Deep Space Nine. But it's really, really rare, particularly, no offense, at your level right now. Higher up the food chain, maybe down the road, but honestly, if people you show your stuff for feedback, probably your friends, your mom, they're not going to steal your stuff. Your mom might, I don't know your mom, nothing personal. I'm sure she's never left a guy down a flight of stairs, but don't worry about that. Other questions? Now, we'll narrow this down. Who has a really good question, applicability to other people? Fuck. With the beard back there.
Rewriting. How do you feel about rewriting?
I love rewriting.
You love rewriting?
Yes. Here's why.
Okay.
And this thank you for a very good question, by the way. The process of writing is a producer manuscript that is like this tabletop. It's smooth. You don't bump into it. And when I start out on a script, I always overwrite my first draft. I start with that. And I start off saying everything I can say about a subject. I go through the revision and I sand it down to what I need to say about that subject. Go through it, and I do it again. I sand it down to what I need to say. What I can say, what I want to say, what I need to say. So that revision should almost always be about taking away, not adding to. Because invariably when you're sitting down to write the first draft, and you're reaching for the right words, you may get the words on the shelf next to the right word, but not the right word. You may use 2 or 3 words to say what you want to say just one. So for me, rewriting is the fun of it. I got to the end, the heavy lifting is done, the clay is on the table. Now you begin to form it, now you begin to revise it, streamline it, to find ways to make things work better. I love the rewriting process. At a certain point you have to let it go. I mean, art is never finished, only abandoned. And so you have to at some point say, I'm done. But honest to God, the rewriting part is the most exciting part of being a writer if you do it right. Ma'am.
I wanted to ask about the breaking in process. You stopped the story at the coolest part. You left, and then you went into television, but you didn't say how. And I know that's the secret of being a good writer, but you got to finish the story.
I know. All right. When I finished, I got out of journalism. I wandered the wilderness for a little over a year. I had no income. I sold most of what I had to sell, including a coin that my family emigrated here in 1910. They got a gold $5 piece, which they passed down, and I had to sell it just to make rent. It was really freaking hard year and a half actually. And I then did everything completely wrong. I did the show that was on the air called He-Man and Masters of the Universe. What's wrong with you? First New Jersey gets applause now. He-Man gets
Childhood.
It was your childhood. Yes. Fuck all y'all. I'm not that freaking old. We are. It was going so well until you started trouble. Anyway, I love the shows. I like cartoons. I like dopey cartoons. That was a really big dopey cartoon. And so I did exactly the wrong thing to do. I don't care. People outside the cookie, we're going to do this again. And I knew people who wrote animation, but they didn't give me any help at all. They didn't want the competition. So I wrote a spec script for He-Man, sent it in blind, did exactly the wrong thing, no contact, no agent, sent it in, and God knows how, but somehow the other producer got hold of it and read it, and called me, asked me in for a meeting, and said, look, we can't buy this, I would like this in the works, but you have other stories to pitch. And I came back with 3 or 4 stories, and he liked one of them enough to say you can write the outline, read the outline, and put the script in, and they bought it. I made $600 bucks, which I most ever made on it, in one time. And I wrote 3 more as freelancer, and then they hired me on staff. And I was on staff somewhere in the next 20-some years. So I did everything wrong, but sometimes it happens. Every writer gets to where they're going by a road that rolls up behind them. The path that works for me will not work for you. The general signposts along the way I can point you to and say, avoid this road and that road. But no 2 writers get to where they go alike. Sure. By up against the wall, you jumping up and down, this better be a really freaking good question.
It's a really freaking good question.
Okay.
Okay, so what happens if you're on a project and your supervisor, who is not a very good writer and he doesn't really know what he's talking about.
So you're making this up at this point.
No. I'm in the situation.
I know.
And he tells you, take out these parts, take out that chapter, take out this scene, and in your head you're screaming, you're like, no, I need this stuff. What do you do? And that person is your supervisor.
We just covered that. Well, I'll do it briefly. What if they're right? Sometimes you have to kill your children to, make these things work. I would say try it without it, see how it works, And if it doesn't work, then put it back in again. Tell them fuck off. Yes, sir.
Some of my favorite works that you did were like dealt with power from like left field or somewhere. So how do you go about thinking about issues in such a way where they're not the normal take, the normal way they go about them? Where you're just coming from like the right field with something and putting like a unique spin on it, something super.
I think what it comes down to is you have to come at every story from a non-obvious point of view. As an actor, that job of making choices, and there's 5 obvious choices. We're doing a show about a German working under Hitler during the war. Okay, and then we cast that part. There's 5 ways actors can come in to play that role. It's the obvious way. Comes in loud, and bidding like this, and carrying on. And there's the one guy who comes in at the story from a non-obvious point of view. Very soft-spoken, very business-like, relaxed, and that's the more interesting way to go. You train yourself to say, okay, these are all the obvious choices. Now, what's the least obvious choice? What cuts against that? When you did Thor, they said we're going to put Asgard because Asgard has always been. We're going to rebuild it. This big, huge, magical place. You're going to put it somewhere back, in the dimension above the Earth, Manhattan. Where do you want to put Asgard? I said, Oklahoma. Right in the middle of flatland Oklahoma, where it's flat, Asgard, flat. I said, are you out of your mind? I said, well, yeah, but that's not the point. Because what you want to do is the contrast. Because Thor next to Iron Man is not that huge a jump in power. Thor next to the guy who runs the diner is a huge difference in power. It makes him more godlike. But by the same token, having him in an environment where he's at a town meeting makes him more human. You always have to go for the least obvious choices. Sometimes that means making counterintuitive choices. Turn it upside down. If you're doing a story about a certain character and you see a certain way, just step back for a second and say, turn it upside down. What does it look like? What happens? And that will keep your stories fresh and keep you fresh as a writer. Whether it's issues with power, character, whatever it is, just turn the story upside down and see how it looks. Blue shirt against the wall. I tend not to read much about the writer's works if I can avoid it, because I think it's in the area that I'm working in, because I don't want to be contaminated. I don't believe in competition between writers at all. As I mentioned earlier, no two writers will write alike. We all have our own voice. There's no competition. What you're selling is your point of view. No one else has that. So for me, I don't tend to read other writers. If I'm doing a historical piece, I will avoid reading history for a while. I don't want to be colored by that. Read something else entirely. And sometimes, reading a funny novel or story will give you the idea what should be funny once in a while. This dry historical piece that I'm writing. So we can read counterintuitively as you write counterintuitively. Two more questions we can do. Now, not only are you waving, this person that's next to you is pointing at you. So you have an awesome responsibility. Next question.
You said you read like 12 hours.
Just giving you a hard time, come on.
Okay, sorry.
It's all right. It's okay. Fear is all right. Just don't show it.
You said you actually invested like 12 hours. You said how many hours you actually invested in doing research on the story you're writing?
2 hours I want to do it for a second. First, I can consider research part of the writing process. So what I'll tend to do is I'll write till like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, crash, get up around noon, look for my face, find it. It's always the same fucking face. It's really pissing me off. Then spend the next 2 hours researching, going to meetings, returning phone calls, and at 8 o'clock at night the engine starts up, and next thing I know I'm writing till 4 in the morning. You're a nervous person speaking in public, aren't you? You're nervous talking in public, I assume.
No, not really. I just kind of a speech impediment. I'm just trying very hard to be smooth. I mean, trying not to trip all over myself.
I had that same problem.
Really?
Yes, I did. and to the point where I was taking a class in science fiction writing